So as Andy described, this is going to be a masterclass. So you should have a candidate data product in mind. So if you don't have one yet, you have about 2 slides to get that. And I'll be walking through some examples to bring it to life. But certainly, we're going to go through, for your product, the why, the what, the how. So if you don't have a product yet, maybe there's 3 ways that you might be able to think of a domain. One starts with the subject. Subject may be like a customer, a real product that you have, an asset, a report. It might be a function, right? HR, sales, supply chain. If you're in a bank, maybe credit. It could also start from a systems perspective. If you have a system that you're running already, what's the data contained in that system? What are the use cases? Who are the users? So start thinking about what your candidate product is going to be, because that's going to help you fill out the workbook and really get the most out of this session. So let's really bring us into a data product mindset, right? So this is a difference from a technology data project into a business-driven data product. And so technology data projects might, be single shot, right? They're still going to be use case driven, but it might be tackling a specific use case. We're thinking about the end deliverable in mind without iteration, right? So it might be a single shot. You might not be thinking about reuse across that product for different parts of the business. It might just be for that single use case. And at the end of the day, these data projects tend to be technology oriented, right? So when we talk about it, it's things around systems, zones, buckets, tables, right? It's really hard to see the business value in a data project. Now let's pivot our mindset to thinking about data products. In a data product, we're really thinking about it just like any other product that you might buy in the store, right? It's something that a user really desires, finds useful, is valuable. And so starting with that product, think about what is the value. It might be the data itself. It might be how you process the data, how you label the data. It's the quality. It might be the mode of access that you can provide. It's going to be around a continuous product release cycle. So rather than a single shot, a use case and an insight, we're going to revisit this product, have versions on it, maybe think about what the users are using the data product for, and how do you add more data, add more insights to make it even better. And then finally, it's supporting multiple use cases. That same data being able to be used across the enterprise, maybe with partners as well. And so can that single data product actually support many users and really be able to recoup and make the benefit off that data product investment? And then the main change is going to a product owner mindset, right? This is led by the business. And as a result, you're able to see the business in the architecture. We're moving away from technology terms into business terms. I should be able to see the part of my business that might be supporting in life sciences clinical trials. I might be able to see the parts that support clinical trial documents, right? The search versus the creation of the documents. So it really pivots that mindset here. So hopefully I'm giving you some time to think about your candidate data product, because in the next hour, we're going to be thinking about, again, the why. Why should we create that data product? What is your scope of the domain and the vision? What comprises a data product? So in that whole scope and vision, let's pick your initial 1 or 2 products that we're going to use as a lighthouse or marquee data product to really prove the value, right? So let's get that specification. And then finally, the how. How do we get started? So it's not just a single group's journey, right? It might be led by that product owner and that domain. But this is probably one of the first forays into data products that you might have across the business. So what's the role of that central data organization? What's the role of others that you need to create the products? And then most importantly, who are the consumers? Are they bought in? Are they willing to use the product and be able to measure value from it? So let's get started. So we're going to start with the why. Why should we create a data product? And so if you've downloaded the workbook already, let me give you a peek. This is what you should be filling out right now. So for your candidate domain, really think about what's that vision and the scope. So this is what we're going to be doing in that section. And to get started, right, thinking about the scope, it's who are the users, what are their data needs, what's the data that you might have already. Right? So this is what we want to get out of this session. If we go back to think about, again, the objective of the business, now let's start with thinking about why the data product. And so for that, you need to have KPIs. And so the data product, again, one of the valuable pieces about it, it's prepackaged, right? So data project from before might require me getting somebody to access the system, getting a pool of that data, getting other data engineers and data scientists to find an insight, and then finally giving it to me. In this case, that product needs to be prepackaged. And when it's prepackaged, this is going to allow speed, right, in terms of IT speed, so reduce costs and improved efficiencies, as well as business speed, business being able to find new insights, new opportunities for business efficiency and user experience. Trust. Trust makes it easy and more secure, right? So I need to know where the data is and what to use. And so from an IT perspective, I could reduce risk because I know someone else has handled things like PII for me. From a business side, I also can reduce risk. It'd be great to be able to say, this is the product to use when you're doing things like looking up tax rates. It might be something around the models. These are the models that you should be used when computing something like predictive maintenance. It's not only certified by your business, but maybe from the manufacturer of that equipment. Real-time information, so the freshness of your data. And this is going to be able to help both from an IT perspective to be able to help with the automation, and then also from the business perspective, you can really accelerate that time to act. So for things like closed-loop automation or real-time offers. Accessibility, so making it easy to access data. So could I make it much faster to find and use, so both from an IT perspective to be able to enable our users, but also from how you partner, how you might partner B2B with your partners, with your customers, across the different lines of business. How can you actually get access to that data, making it seamless as possible? And finally, usability, making it really easy to use, right? So this should be measured in terms of the increase in number of users who are able to find that data and to start using it, but also in terms of maybe for the business, direct monetization, right? So people who are going to be able to create new business streams from using that data product. The data product itself might be a new business stream. So as you think about the scope for your product, right, let's fill out that measures of success and really push to define things that are really measurable. So I'm going to walk through an example of such a filled out version while you're working on yours, right? So this is a case for smart construction. And in smart construction, it's all about the projects. It's about project risk. And so we would like to look at these projects that can do a retrospective and identify risks and opportunities looking back in the past, but also real time as a project is ongoing. Can I actually predict and get ahead of risks and maybe identify opportunities for increased efficiency? All of this is with a promise to add AI to make this better, and then to be able to add real-time updates, right, so that you get notified right away and you can take action. So with that scope in mind, what are our measures of success? And our measures are really around, again, being able to see right away and have that predictive nature to look back in the past. I want to be able to reduce the manual efforts and errors. So I should be able to measure that. I want to be able to reduce project man hours. I could be able to have savings from that. Again, something that's measurable in terms of the outcome. From an IT perspective, I want to be able to reduce the time it took for a project manager to generate the report. A lot of this might be by making it easier to find the data, but also maybe generating the report for us in the right structure, right? So I know ahead of time both the scope of this domain and the objectives and how I'm going to measure those KPIs. So now it's time to really express that scope of the domain. And so use again, the users that you had in the use cases to think about, how much of this data do you need to answer those questions, right? So if it's around things like project progress and how a project has risk and is maybe over budget, you might start with the project, understanding what feeds into that project is a work package. That work package comprises of tasks, and the tasks are described in detail in an engineering document. Maybe those tasks also are related to purchase orders that have suppliers in which you're going to be able to measure things like cost as well as whether you're going to get the supplies on time and risk there. It's about the workers who actually work on the project. And maybe another use case might be around safety and incidents around safety. So being able to attach the workers to the safety incidents attached to the projects, and maybe against the risk and opportunity. So really use this to scope out your domain. And this is not done by yourself, right? It's typically the business sponsor with the users that you have in mind, and really thinking about what is the meaningful needs that are being addressed. So if we were to pick a different project, you might have a project that looks like maybe a bottom-up, right? I might start with something like a financial report. And I might want to think about all the different users who might want to see this financial data, right? So I might be able to start with the finances and say, well, it might be consumed by users who are, in this case, my case with smart construction, it was all from the same group, right, the project team. But instead, if I might switch it around and say there might be users who are doing analytics. There might be users who are generating their own reports. There might be users in the digital part of the company creating things that are maybe in the websites or for a connected worker sort of application, right? So you could think about it the other direction as well, from the data set or the data asset and outwards, right? But really think about the questions and the job to be done that's trying to be addressed by the data product. Once you have this, right, what we're going to be doing next is really taking that domain that was scoped. And in that domain, there's a lot of needs as well as a lot of products that are underneath those needs. And so now we want to map it to the actual data itself. Who owns those systems, and how do we incentivize them to be able to help create the products? And some of them are going to be what I call core products. These are very tied to the data sources at hand, and some will be derived products. These are going to take core derived products and actually create added value and added insights to them. But it's all to support the different use cases that we just identified. So in the use case that I just described with smart construction, right, we might start with the group that I had at hand. It was the project team. And the project team might own certain assets and data, right? We might have finance and supply chain data. And in this case, some of the core products to be created based off of the use case that we had scoped were things around the purchase order and expense and the time spent on the project. Right, this is not, though, enough. We scoped out that we needed much more data to be able to actually create a meaningful product for the questions that our users wanted to answer. So the next phase might be looking at some of where is this other data coming from. And these other systems might be in systems like engineering data that might have things around the work package and the engineering diagrams. HR data that might have information about the workers themselves. The enterprise data that might have additional reporting around safety and risks. And so now you have these other systems that might be owned by other teams and with other domains who know that data better, right? They actually know the data and are able to get the meaningful extract that you need to answer your question. And so this part is really important to understand, who are these other groups to be able to power the product and the use case and the objective that you've identified. Second now is that you do have additional value. You have the context that you're the expert in this case, maybe the forecast of completion of the project. And so as that expert, you're adding value by bringing together these other data products and adding a derived product. So it's the forecast that you're adding, and it might be the original purchase order and expense that you're bringing together into that project summary. But that's really the scope of the use case that we're trying to support. And to make it easier for these other groups to actually create their own data products, using this process might be a way to help them think that just by having those initial products, the core products from the work package group, the risk team, and maybe the HR, something around a worker, it's actually supporting new use cases, right? So it might be a work package around digital twins, right? Digital twins in the case of a vessel. It might be a new data product around risk and risk reporting. Maybe we help and use those core products to create a projected risk score. For the worker, it might be something that feeds up into an HR portal for people to serve, right? So it's really thinking about, again, these as building blocks that are intended to work together. And of course, this is required to get the investment needed to be able to tap into some of these systems and to get the buy-in into that shared success. So through this first section, we really are focused on the why, right? So by this point, you should have identified a domain, really looking at the scope of that domain. And then for your domain, by doing this exercise, really thinking about mapping to the groups that might own some of those systems that have the data and the sources today, the other domains that are needed to be able to describe some of those products that are actually going to feed into the use case that you have at hand. And so this is a really good way to start mapping that landscape out. Okay, so at this point, you have the why, right? So this is the why. You have the business objective. You have some of the KPIs around how you're going to measure success. You've answered, the users and what they need, delivering something unique, and then really thinking about, what are the other groups and other domains that are needed to create that use case. So now the what. So what is our first product, right? So let's get into the detailed scoping of what that looks like. And so like any other product, right? So just like if I bought something at the store, right? So there's a product life cycle in the data product. And I talked about this a little bit in that product mindset. You start with the conceptualize, the design, and that's a lot of what we're doing in this session right now. Then the manufacture, the rollout, and service. And right in the conceptualize and design, it is really starting to think about the different stakeholders you should be having in the room and the different roles that are needed to be able to achieve this. So conceptualize, right? So this is something that, let me, end to end, right? Let me go through the roles. Maybe that's an easier way to talk about. So the data product owner. So that's a really important role about this, right? So just like any other product, who is somebody who's really obsessed with thinking about the versioning, the vision, the success, the rollout of the product for how it serves those use cases that was identified. And so this data product owner is going to start from the conceptualization phase, design, really be part of manufacturing and informed about the service, but really, again, focused on the rollout, right? Making sure that people are using the product as it was designed and making adjustments if not. The business sponsor, accountable throughout, right? So this is a big pivot that business sponsor is really valuing data as an asset, right? It's something that they're going to be measured against based off of the business metrics. The role of the central team, you'll see that this has pivoted. It's much more of a consultant role, and it's much more of a design authority and maybe helping orchestrate the process and also filling some of the critical roles that I'll talk later about, right? So you might actually be part of the data product architect team, the product team, the operations team. But a lot of this role is really meant to really be a guide and somebody who is actually certifying and governing this entire data product and consumer process. The data product architect, right? So this is somebody who is helping to make sure that the product itself is something that can be delivered and that also adheres to the enterprises and the organization's governance strategies and the right management strategies, and making sure how do we design that product in the manufacturing. The product team itself, right, so this comprises of your data scientists, your data engineers, your system architects, and these are the people who actually make the product happen. And then finally, operations. So just like any other product or any other application that you have in the enterprise, there should be a service level to that. So even if the service level is a defined best effort or no service level, that needs to be very explicitly thought through. And so in this case, it might be that, again, that central team might actually play this role, but sometimes it's actually played by a different group, right? Somebody that you can have an escalation towards. So if I have an issue with my data product, it's down, I could make a call. Somebody can routinely monitor for events and maybe update it, right? So I need to be able to have that as well. So these are some of the roles and the people that you should be involving in your design and conceptualization phase. So this part of the section is really to fill out this view, right? So take the domain that we just scoped and really think about what is your data product, right? Let's define that in a bit more detail. What is your first or second data product that you want to have rolled out? And so to get that detail, we're going to want to have specific definitions about the vision, the user, the value, the technology, the usability, and how you're going to communicate and roll this out. So let me bring it to life with an example. So we're going to talk about a medtech manufacturer. So this medtech manufacturer, this is the end of that first exercise. Let's start with a data domain around a digital health record, right? right? So this digital health record, they make a lot of devices, and they're able to bring it together to show, ideally, a view of Teresa across all the devices that she uses, right? So that's the unique product. And this domain might have a couple of core products that it supports, right? It might be third-party data. They might have bought social data and being able to bring it in for them to use. It's the original digital health record that they're going to work to harmonize and bring together in that single view of Teresa across their different product lines. It might be feed management. There might be third-party devices with streaming data or data that Teresa posts, maybe other devices that are not made by this manufacturer, and also being able to harmonize that together. So there might be some core products that this digital health record team, who knows this domain the best, is able to bring together. And it might support a couple of derived products, right? So from that digital health record, so let's really focus on that health record and look at 3 types of products that could bring. So it might be the original health record itself that an internal user within that digital health record team might use. There might be another product for another part of the business. Maybe there's a business that's creating solutions and remedies for things like COPD, right, lung disease. And that team might also want to use this data to really power their use cases, right? So ideally, they could also have raw view of that data, but it might not make sense from a governance perspective, right? So having a synthetic data record for them to experiment with to begin with might be a great first start. It might be a partner product, and a partner product having a partner API, right? They're not going to get access to the whole raw data set, but something that's more curated and easy for that partner to consume, also having that view. So this single digital health record, that core product, might lead to 3 derived product that with 3 separate use cases to support. So if I was to fill out that particular worksheet, here's how it might go. Right? So that internal product for another use case within that digital health record team, that's within that single business domain, right? That's the user set. And that user set, we're going to get value. We're going to get value because that team's working off that same view of the data. It's going to improve internal efficiency and make for better decision making. And that technology and that interface might be an analytical record, right? It might be something like that. And we're going to have some centralized governance to make sure that we're adhering to things like PII standards and the communication. If we're all on the same team, there might be an internal wiki. I might even know the other team members and reach out to them directly, right? That's one type of product. Second might be a product that is for cross lines of business. In the example I was giving, maybe it's another part of the business doing something with COPD. And in this case, as we move across lines of business, maybe the value here is around innovation, right? We're trying to help use this data set and make it, when it's consumed as a product, usable for other parts of the business to base their business on, right? And so as we do this, maybe the technology itself is a sandbox, and it's a sandbox for these users to be able to use. So I mentioned synthetic data. It might be the sandbox itself that turns on when it's needed, and that people can use and monitor, and then it shuts down when it's done, right? And this way we could really control access of that particular sandbox and those users. And for this, there's a usability and a delivery mechanism, right? It's things around service levels, right? I mentioned being able to call somebody if it's not working. What's my expectation to getting access to this? What's my expectation about costs? What's my expectations about things like lineage and quality of the data, right? And then finally, communications, right? So in this case, maybe an enterprise data catalog is what's needed to be able to have others within the company be able to find it, see how much it's going to cost them to use, or see what sort of access mechanisms need to be automated or even manually approved, right? But to be able to track that. And then finally, I mentioned an external product, right? This is an external product that might be for medical grade data that we have from this health record. And for external partners to use, this might actually create a new revenue stream, right? Something that per call or per insight we might be able to monetize. And in this case, the interface might be an API. And the API, as we define it, we're really thinking again about who are our partners and how easy it is for them to pick up this product to use, right? So things around adhering to health standards, fire standards that are amenable with HL7, right? It might be if I'm partnering with Salesforce, having something that is easily mapped to an S data format. If I'm working with Microsoft, having something very easily mapped to an O data format. So how can I make this super easy, again, for my partner to be able to use? And that might make that product much better. The usability and delivery of it, right? So thinking about your service level agreements, and in this case, true agreements as to how the businesses are going to share the outputs from this data product, and really we have to have this cross-organizational collaboration. So these are some mappings and the sort of specificity that we want to get to when we're deciding that particular single first or second data product that we've identified from our scope. So as you're filling out and thinking about your product, right, so across these dimensions, there's might be some points of differentiation that you can think about, right? So in your vision, right, so this is your vision about what this product is going to enable the end users to do and that business objectives. So think about the uniqueness in the data that you have. It might be the uniqueness in the insights that you could provide, either business insights or analytics. It might be in a labeled data set that you have experts have done and it's cleansed and it has a great quality. It might be in the business model of what you're able to certify, right? If I certify this as the trusted data, there might be additional differentiation there. The users, so again, knowing your end user and what they need and how they work. And so thinking about the form factor, thinking about making it self-service for that citizen user, maybe not a tech user. If I'm giving something for my finance team, they love things in Excel. If I'm giving it something in my business users, it might be a dashboard. If it's the data scientist, it might be yet a different function. The definitions, having definitions that are really easy in the language that people use, and documentation. User support, training, and having that coverage across geographical locations so that your users really feel supported. The value. Again, being able to track your business value and your KPIs. And I did go over this a bit in the earlier section, but really thinking about is it reduced costs, improved efficiency, innovation, collaboration, monetization, being able to actually track this, again, with data itself. The technology, to really think about being able to compete even on the technology. And this is where, I do get a lot of questions with data mesh and thinking about data products. Is the technology still important? Of course, right? The technology might be one of the ways that you're competing and making a better product itself. So the ease of integration, the ease of composability, how easy it is to create a technology interface, and the speed and scale at which processing might be able to be done. The reduced cost, and maybe adding more model-driven development or semantic layers to that technology, making this all secure and private, right? So differentiating on the technology. Differentiating on the usability and delivery, right? Thinking about who are the users. And so again, for a user to actually look at the data and to be able to make a decision, things around metadata, things about master data. Master data might be a great way to make your product much better. The quality, consistency, timeliness, lineage, standards adherence, right? All of these could make your data much easier for that end user to use. Communication. So communication is around being able to manage your users and stakeholders, right? To be able to help them find the data to be able to use it. So things like making it easily adherable to a report, finding it in a catalog, search-driven, maybe having event-driven notifications about changes and updates, having that support mechanism, so L1 through L3 support, feedback, a roadmap and versions of your product, community management. So really thinking about, again, these are all points of differentiation that you may choose to have in your product. You might need it to be there if you're actually going to work with different parts of the business or different partners. Okay, so we've done the why, we've done the what. Now let's talk about the how, right? So how do I get started? So at this point, here's where some of the central team might play a bigger role, right? So we have an ecosystem management. So we have producers and consumers of data. And so how do we attract, how do we engage, how do we operate this product? How do we grow this sort of behavior across the business? How do we evolve products? And then how do we monetize, right? So this might be a place that, again, that central organization is really helping drive this particular maturity. So with the attracting of the product consumers and the product producers themselves, right? Being able to first talk about, the concept. I think when I speak to some of people who are not data people about data products, they wonder, they're like, have you not been doing this all along? No, we haven't been doing this all along. We've been much more technology-led. So even thinking about data products with the same vernacular, how it might change a data organization and the business, changing the roles of the organization to be more domain and business-led, that attracting of that mission is a key first step. Then the engagement. Let's take, and this might be where you are in your journey, let's get that first or second marquee product up, and this is what's really going to prove out the value that we've just got a lot of excitement for, right? So let's be able to maintain and create those initial products and really be able to value that success. And the only way to do that is to be able to actually push it out into the operations, right? So operations means being able to support all the different business groups that no longer are in the same line of business, right? Your user groups are now across the business. So how do you support these different communities who might have different levels of both tech maturity as well as expectations? Finally, the grow. So now that you have your initial successes, ideally through that initial first few products that you've launched, you're going to also be able to produce some of the core frameworks that you're needing to be able to monitor this at scale, right? So we think about things like metadata hubs. We think about things like data virtualization. We think about things like data fabrics and knowledge graphs, right? These are things that make it easier for people to produce products and to consume products. So can we actually use those initial products to be able to set some of this foundation and the ways of working, improving how it works? And then finally, the evolution, right? The evolution in monetization means that it's not just that single shot. It might be regularly revisiting the different products and being able to help the different groups be able to evolve to the next stage. You might see two products and be able to say, these products, maybe they're closely aligned. Should there be a derivative product that actually combines them together? Maybe we see people searching for a type of product that nobody has, and maybe reaching out to certain groups who are most likely to be able to create those products and fill those gaps, right? So this is really, again, another part of that central team that's going to be able to help. So for this part of it is really thinking about, again, the how, right? So we have the products identified that we want to create first. And so we're going to need to get that product team up, right? So there's a new product team that needs to be stood up, and some of those roles I've listed at the bottom. There's the team itself. It's the role of the central team, maybe the operations team if it's a different team. It's the data product architect. It's the business sponsor. It's the data product owner. It's looking at the data sources in the different organizations that you need to be able to feed your data product and making sure that they have the support and we know what they need to be able to feed that stream. It's the creation of the product itself, right? It's, are we going to do some exploratory products, things like curated data or APIs, data models, or maybe things that are much more packaged. I mentioned things like workbenches. It could be things like dashboards or reports or just the insights, right? So thinking about what that looks like. And then finally, it's the users. Identifying your users, and again, thinking about the interfaces and the buy-in they need to be able to best consume the products and get value. And how do you measure the whole thing? So I'm going to, ideally, like for this sheet, you should be thinking about who are the people in your space, right? So identifying names or group names, and then really thinking about the buy-in that you need from these different organizations to make that initial product work. So in this case study, I'm going to talk about a product that we did for anti-money laundering. So this is a utility that we created for banking consortium. So anti-money laundering is something every bank needs to do. And this is a consortium of 70 mid-sized banks, and we wanted to be able to take on their anti-money laundering function for them. And so by definition, each bank, they already had data, right? Data in many different systems in many different formats. And they had desires, right? They wanted better AML management and reporting, better model validation, better alerting. And by working together, we could help them reduce their labor costs, reduce false positives, so better reporting, and a reduction in the model validation, right? So we were able to identify, again, the objectives coming in. and why we should be doing this. So in this case, with the banks, so each bank, what do they need to provide so that they could, again, power this data product that we're trying to create? So in each bank, which had different systems and different schema and different teams, it was really about getting, maybe a data mapping playbook, having some of the metadata and automated profiling tools that says, like, before we can actually bring this in as a raw data to power our data product, we need to make sure it has the right quality. We need to be able to track it from your system into our product creation, right? So having some of that automated. It's adding some of these standard dictionaries so that we're all talking about the same thing. It's adding some of the security protocols to make sure that we're securely bringing the data in and that we can actually track it from the moment it leaves that bank all the way through all the insights and the different people who might touch it and the different models and tools that touch it, right? So it's really thinking about, again, what is that interface that we need to get buy-in for those data source systems? So next, let's talk about the consumers, right? So the banks are feeding data in. Banks are also expecting, the AML utility. What's the outputs that they're looking at? So some of the outputs are listed here. Right, so things around performance monitoring. So can I monitor how well the rules are working and the alerts? Model validation. How well are the models working? And again, this might be something that's more for a data scientist to look like. Scenario optimization. So for the scenarios that I have, could I go back and replay the data, change the parameters, change the models, do some what-if planning? I might look at productivity, right? So the productivity of the analysts who are actually working on processing these suspicious activity reports. And then finally, horizontal benchmarking, right? So we talked about having a vision to be able to have each bank, since they're using similar models and similar processes, to be able to benchmark how well their models and parameters are doing against other banks, right? So these are some of the products and the uses, right, that we're trying to support. So for that, again, thinking about the consumer, so we have a couple of personas that we've identified, right? Business users, so business analysts, regulators. And in that case, you might have custom visualizations for those performance monitoring, scenario optimization, productivity tracking, benchmarking that I showed before. Having a standard API that actually takes the results of these systems and actually sucks them into some of the transaction monitoring solutions that they're already using, right? So it's how they usually actually look at some of this work and really being custom to that, right? So I think that was one. There was another set of users around data scientists and data analysts. And in this case, it's a very different sort of interface. It's having a workbench with the right governance flows to be able to have these users be able to experiment with some data, to be able to create new models and test them. And if they're approved and validated, we might push them into the system to be used, right? So thinking about the advanced users as well. So the same product is feeding all these different use cases. So now let's think about another dimension, right? So now thinking about what the central organization might do. And central organization certainly is going to provide things like architecture and tooling. Central organization is going to provide things like governance and support. Another really important thing is around service and service operations. So just like you have application monitoring and infrastructure monitoring, you're now going to apply that to your data product, right? So being able to monitor your data jobs, tuning and optimization, the data migration, the debug. So there's a certain expectation if you're going to be running in this way, right? Who's going to be answering the phone? Is someone going to answer the phone? How quickly are they going to answer the phone? And then similarly at the platform level, the tools that support it. So really thinking about if this is needed, and if so, who's actually going to be doing this sort of work. So if we now look at, again, thinking about that, filling out that mauve pink layer, right, about the governance, the architecture, the operations. At the governance level, it's really thinking about providing a standardized data management tool set. And in that tool set, we want to have some of that automated metadata. And this automated metadata is really important to be able to, we talked about being able to programmatically and federated governance of your data mesh, right? So being able to add this right at the governance layer means that all the banks can actually trust the results that we're seeing. And then for the utility that's being run, we can actually trust the data coming from the banks. The architecture, having these pre-configured, secure data architectures in which to build the products and to consume. And then your operations, and this is a lot of the support that I just talked about, right? Thinking about if we do have this level of operations, who's going to be able to pick up the phone? And so being able to identify this level of detail. So as you're thinking about your organization and how your product might need to be created, think about who your data sources are, right? Who are the organizations who own that data? What's the build that they need to support, to be able to support the product that you had in mind? Who are the producers, that team right at the bottom? Like, these should be named individuals. Who's actually going to be playing some of these critical roles? The central team, right? Does the central team have any existing tooling around governance, architecture, operations that we can repurpose? Or are there some of that tooling that needs to be augmented? In the previous example, I talked about maybe metadata and automated metadata management as one of those things. And then finally, in the consumption and usage, right? Who are your end users? And what are the interfaces that need to be built so that they can best be able to use that product? So, I think we quickly walked through already, the why. So why is your domain scope and vision, right? This is identifying the unique data needs and the users. And this is an iterative process where you're going to work with your users to confirm those needs. 2 is a particular product definition. So from that domain and scope, there's probably 1 or 2 products that make sense to launch in the beginning. And this is taking that product team, right, the data product owner, the data product architect, your central data team, your business sponsor, your product team, right, and bringing them together to think about and really define the vision for supporting the users to measure the value of that data product. And then finally, leading into the manufacturer, like how are we going to manufacture? How are we going to govern? How are we going to service and operate this product? And how are we going to evolve that product, right? So now you have the pieces for it. So hopefully you're asking some questions. We're going to be able to get to that soon. I wanted to leave with 2 more slides that really show this journey, right? So we were able to talk a lot about this path around strategy and governance, right? We're really talking about the vision, the stakeholders, identifying initial key use cases, the success metrics. How do you have this cross-group ways of working that leads to product roadmap releases and partner ecosystems? And all of this is towards this more automated, data-centric business. There's other dimensions that are just as important that need to be thought through. And well, this shouldn't be scary. It's more meant to be a checklist, right? So just like hopefully I've shown that initial arc that we've checked how to do that, we've also have some things you could check. So thinking about an architecture that supports data products, thinking about a development, a data ops process that supports the development and consumption of data products, thinking about regulation and ethics. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So that applies the same with your data products. And then user support. And I think the user support is something that is a bit newer, right? Thinking about users outside that single organization and what they would do. So hopefully you have scoped out your data product with the ingredients that you need to be able to create your business plan. So if there's any time for questions.
Teresa.
Hey, Andy.
Well, I found that really insightful, very interesting. So thank you. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through in the chat that I thought I'd come up and pose to you. So what if you've got consumers that would like just access to the raw data, which isn't necessarily curated? Is that considered to be a data product or not, in your opinion?
Yeah, it is a data product. And as you think about that, you need to think about, again, some of these business metrics. Should they be looking at it? What sort of governance and protections do you have in place for that? So that is a very valid product.
OK, that's interesting. And so what is the role of data stewardship, I should say, in a data product approach?
I think it's a very critical service. Mm-hmm. So in that central organization, part of that role is to really be stewards of the data products, and especially anything that is going to go across outside that single line of business. Yep. So as soon as you exit a domain and another part of the organization is basing their business on yours, and it might not be literal business in terms of money exchange, but yes, we're going to create a product where we want to have a single view of the customer. Mm-hmm. that's a very great product, right? So we might each do things about customer. If you're B2B, I'm B2C, you're government, I'm commercial.
Yep.
I'm maybe China, you're US, right?
Yep.
Things like that. So that stewardship is part of what's going to help bring that together. So all the things we did with stewardship and master data and quality and lineage, they now become important services that differentiate.
Okay, that's awesome. And I think we've got maybe one or two more. So the relationship between a domain owner and a product owner, can they be one and the same, or are they different, or can you just sort of expand a little on that?
They could be one and the same, especially when you start out. But like the example I gave with the digital health record, right? In the digital health record, it might grow where that initial health record, you might even have a different product owner for the partner product, maybe the partner product with Salesforce versus with Microsoft, right?
Okay.
And then we have that same underneath product, maybe for internal versus for different lines of business. And so that might be under a domain owner versus the products themselves might eventually have unique product owners.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so who decides kind of what criteria are used to create derived products specifically?
Well, I think it goes to what the product actually is, right? Mm-hmm. So the core products typically are the teams that own the systems. Mm-hmm. And they, just by virtue of owning the system, there's a lot of control there. And you might need to upgrade that system, so that's kind of where it's at. But the derived products, you might have many, many derived products, right? You might have derived products from derived products. At any point in which you have a domain that's adding something new, right? It's a unique context and a unique insight.
Okay. And if you had let's say you had an immature data platform where you had, sort of pain points today, and then you adopt kind of the data mesh approach around data products, can you see that resolving and helping those kind of pain points that you may have in your underlying platform, or is that something you need to resolve before you begin?
No, I think it's actually a great mindset, because if maybe you have a more legacy system that you're looking to modernize, it's a great way by identifying the use and tying it to a business objective to be able to now make the business case to modernize that system. So one, it might be a really good thing to do. Another common case is you're in the middle of a migration and modernization. Right. And so since you have that project ongoing, mm-hmm. You're probably talking to a lot of the users and the stakeholders anyways. Let's get them to adopt some of this product mentality so they feel more like owners. So again, we're moving from a case where I'm saying I'm doing a migration from system A into bucket here, and then zone 1, zone 2, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to move to say, here's actually the product that supports this part of the business.
Okay, thank you. That's quite an extensive answer. And then one or two more. We had a lot of interest in your session, which is great. So in a cross-domain data product where the originating data comes from multiple different domains, who owns the ultimate delivery of that product, and kind of where does that cross-domain program management play a role? Is that part of this? Super important. None of this works with that cross-domain, which is a new role for that central team, right? The central data team. And that's why I really did stress a lot, not just on the data itself or the tech, on that service level, the usability, the user groups. And so if you're going to have that product that's derived, you need to first incentivize that other domain to make the investment, right? So they might not have been planning to make the investment mm-hmm. into getting it into the format that you need, but you're going to need them both to tie in from the technology perspective, but you're also going to need them to help you shape the data, because they know it the best, right? So how do you get that investment? And they should be shared in that success. Oh, that's cool. And then the last one, I think, is there a difference in your opinion between the concept, I guess, of data as a product versus a data product? That's it feels like quite a philosophical question, but again, do you have any thoughts? It's just coming from our audience. I guess maybe data product is actually the thing that you could take and use, and maybe data as a product, sometimes people do think of, they associate that term maybe with an API itself, right? Okay. So it seems like quite a philosophical question. Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you for your time, and thank you for answering all those great questions.